Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Hope everyone had a happy and joyous holiday. Tonight, we want to congratulate you or tell you you've been on a naughty list because depending on your view of tonight's topic, it seems you were either very good or you were on that naughty list. Our topic tonight is either a gift to you for being good or it's your lump of coal, and that is cardiology. So this is the one medical specialty that coders either truly love or truly hate. And I've heard that the cardiology chapter of the CPC course is the one that gives the most people the most problems.
It is. I can attest to that as a guild instructor. It is. It is.
And cardiology does cover a wide range of cardiovascular diseases and treatments. So a coder must be able to have a broad sense of coding for these type of services and the anatomy. Some people say that the anatomy is the part that trips them up. So tonight we have three panels. We have Lynette Millhouse, who is a current coder at Baptist Healthcare, and she's going to talk about her daily role as a cardiology coder that does daily production. She is also a chapter officer for the Moorhead, Kentucky chapter, where she's the education officer. Next, we have Stacey Donnelly, who is from SLU Care and SSM Health, and she's going to discuss the ideal team members and the expectations for productivity and skill set from her perspective as a previous manager in a previous coding division. And she is also a chapter officer. She's a local chapter president or local chapter officer for the St. Louis chapter. And next we have Kimberly Joliva Williams. So Kimberly Joliva Williams is an educator in cardiology and compliance at JMCI website, http training.jmcipro.com. She's also the president of the Richardson, Texas chapter. So let's get started with talking about cardiology in general. And I'm going to mute my phone because it's just buzzing like crazy. Bear with me. All right, back to this. So let's talk about what cardiology entails. So what are the common conditions that are treated, and what are some of the common services that you'd see performed when you're coding for cardiology? Let's start with you, Kimberly.
Well, that's the joy. I think it's the joy, but it's also the complexity of cardiology. Is when I was a team leader for cardiology and when I was an abstract coder, I felt like I never coded the same thing twice, right? So I'd go from coding major cardiology cases like diagnostics for left heart caths, right? I've even go from coding EKGs and echoes. And then you could do revascularization procedures. I love, even my physicians even got into things like EVARs and TVARs. So I love that. That's the one thing that I loved is every day, day to day, depending on what your volume is in your work queue, you could code something different like every hour of the day, right? And it also gave you the ability to have to research and read. And one of the number one things I always say to do is make sure you read every single year when you're in cardiology, your CPT coding manual, that 30,000 section for cardiology. I read it front to back. Even still, I'm in compliance, not an abstract coder, but dealing with what I deal with for compliance, cardiology issues come up, right? I deal with rack audits and different stuff like that when it comes to diagnostic testing. And so I constantly am reading even my ICD-10 guidelines for Chapter 9 on the disease of circulatory. So I just think that for me, it's the vast variety. Even when I eat food, I love variety, right? So I take that with me into cardiology. I love the choice of variety.
Lynette, can we get your view of what you commonly see and what are some of the common diseases and options for ongoing care when you code in the office?
a lot of the ongoing diseases would be hypertension, heart failure, CKD, diabetes, those common comorbidities that are linked usually. Obesity is a lot of it. Edema, because of the heart failure, is being treated. There's a wide aspect of it. Someone might come in with shortness of breath and might actually end up having heart failure and not even know it, and have never been diagnosed with it, which was actually a case that I had actually seen today, which was very, very odd for a person to have so many signs and symptoms and they just get diagnosed with heart failure and didn't even know it.
I know it. Sometimes we don't pay attention to our bodies like we need to. I was talking to a friend of mine about that the other day. Even things like chest pain, right? I suffer from reflux. And so, just as a habit, when I have chest pain, my first instance is to try to get something because I think I'm having some kind of heartburn or reflux, right? But again, those are things that we really should pay attention to our body because the chest pain could not be reflux. Maybe it could be some type of arrhythmia or something going on that's even more serious in a cardiac realm, right? So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I'm the same way. I keep AFib panels right by my bed every time. If I wake up with a cough, the first thing I do is zap myself. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. But technique. So, Stacy, what are some of the common things you see in your daily life as a cardiac coder?
Well, I would echo what both of Kimberly and Lynette both said. The most common illnesses that we see are going to be your hypertension, chronic heart failure, AFib, arteriosclerosis, CAD, recovery from myocardial infarction, angina, and certain like cardiomyopathies. We in our practice have have just cardiology doctors, general cardiology, but also like electrophysiologists and interventional cardiology too. So we do anything from your standard E&Ms and office visits, cardiac rehab, echoes, EKGs. The interventional guys are going to be doing your PCIs and caths. Our electrophysiologists are going to be doing EP studies, pacemakers, and things like that. Stress tests. It kind of runs the gamut. But I would agree with what Kimberly said. It's interesting. It keeps it interesting because you have such a vast array of different procedures and different aspects of the coding that you can come at it from, that it keeps it interesting for sure. SLU Care is attached to St. Louis University Hospital. So our physicians are in a teaching hospital. So we not only have like your clinic-based stuff, but we also have like inpatient roundings, consults. We deal with residents and interns, and we have APPs. So we deal with split share and all of that. So it keeps even the E&Ms interesting as well. There's a lot of different aspects to cardiology coding. So it definitely keeps your brain engaged during the day.
Absolutely. I know. And even now, I laugh and I find it intriguing, even with the new rules that came for 2024 on E&M, with the multiple E&Ms on the same day. I just think about all the different specialties and subspecialties that we encounter in cardiology, right? And where you could possibly have a patient see an EP doctor and an interventional cardiologist on the same day for a condition. And how is that going to play out, in 2024 with all the new changes and things? It's definitely always intriguing. I always say we're lifetime learners, right? And if you want to be a lifetime learner, you get into cardiology or cardiovascular, you will forever be learning. It's always something new. It's always something going on with the regulatories and guidelines.
So let's get into that. You mentioned there's different types of cardiology. Can we just go over those briefly? What are some of the different types of cardiology doctors, providers, or other kind of specialties within cardiology?
Yeah, well, I know Stacy mentioned some of them when she was talking, but yes, we definitely have interventional cardiologists. We have electrophysiologists. We have pediatric, right, cardiologists. We have just cardiologists that treat, patients, just a cardiology doctor. But there's also, let me see, I made me a little list so I wouldn't forget any. Let me go find my list, but it's so vast and there's so many subspecialties when you're dealing with interventional cardiology. And a tricky part too is depending on how you look it up, they don't always fall under the heading that you would think when you're looking up a doctor to try to identify them as well. I know I used to sometimes I'm looking all over for interventional cardiologists, and it kind of depends on how they're listed. They may be listed in a different way. And so I thought that was funny. But yeah, you have what EP, interventional, and for me we even threw vascular into there because my office we kind of lumped them all together. So when I talk cardiology, a lot of times I'll talk cardiovascular because for me we kind of dealt with all of it. We did vascular cardiology, interventional cardiology, electrophysiology, pediatric, so the whole gamut. We even had thoracic surgeons that were in our practice as well that did the whole open up the chest procedures. So it's just, like I said, a vast variety that we came in contact with, and all those different specialties and subspecialties. And a lot of them are in the same group, right? They're all
Yeah.
in the same group under the same tax ID number, which also throws a whole nother complexity into the mix.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of important to know as a coder who does what and who is kind of different from other cardiologists. Like, because there is a difference with how you bill for different types of doctors. So like I know we had where I used to work before, we had this one cardiologist who only did heart failure clinics. He was specialized as a heart failure cardiologist, and he had his own taxonomy separate from anybody else. So anything that he did was completely separately billable from an interventional radiologist, one of the one of the a primary care cardiologist, which I think primary care has cardiology under its wing. Like there's a little, like I think your, I think your non-invasive cardiologists are technically considered uh, a primary care, with the hyphenated for cardiology. But then there's other specialties like there's nuclear medicine. There's odd ones that you wouldn't even realize that they are separately payable. So being able to identify and know kind of those billing structures is sometimes like important. That way you're not leaving money on the table, especially with
Oh,
an
definitely. Yes,
yeah.
and because some of the procedures, I know there are some procedures when you go look up the medical criteria, then there's some that says a certain portion has to be done by a cardiologist. Then the other portion has to be done by an interventional cardiologist or another type of non-interventional physician. So yes, it's important to know what the status label for that physician is when it comes to the cardiology world because you want to make sure you're adhering to those criterias and guidelines. Because if you were in an audit and you had the improper physician performing those services, it could bring on additional challenges that you might have to face. So you definitely want to know how that provider is listed in the cardiology arena.
Mhm.
All right. So one of the main reasons we do these discussions is we want to give new coders or people that are currently encoding kind of the inside track of what the daily life is for a cardiac coder. So let's talk to Stacy and Lynette, and let's see, what is your day like? What do you do on a daily basis? Like, you code charts. Like, what is your normal routine? And what are some things that any person that's interested in cardiology can expect if they want to apply or obtain a job in cardiology?
Well, so for us, our coding team is responsible for dealing with not only the charging. So for us, our doctors drop charges, and we are verifying that their documentation meets the standard for that code. We will have to change codes, CPT codes and ICD-10 codes to match the documentation, add modifiers and things like that. So I'm coding for all of those procedures that we've just talked about, your caths, PCIs, echoes, EKGs, et cetera, plus all of the E&Ms. And that's most of my day. The other part of my day is we also are responsible for the coding-based denials. So it's important to understand your payer policies and the things that can nuance between payers, especially with Medicare. So for things that CPT might accept, your payers may not accept. So it can be completely different, like the modifiers they accept, or having to have very specific diagnosis codes to go with certain CPT codes, especially like your radiology type stuff, your EKGs, echoes, any sort of CTAs or anything like that. So going through the denials, figuring out what's wrong, charge correcting if necessary, or interfacing with our AR team to either write an appeal or go back to the payer and try to find out exactly why it was denied, because the denial code that they give you doesn't always match up with what is the real reason why they denied something. And then we also deal with claim edits. So, the system we work out of will catch things either from the back end of our system or from the clearinghouses and hit if something's wrong that didn't get caught on the front end. And so we have to correct those claims to get those out to be paid as well. So there are a lot of things. We also cross-train, which is something that is possible, depending on your job. So I not only code for cardiology, but I also code the E&M side for cardiovascular surgery and for vascular surgery. So it really just runs the gamut through the day. There are also research projects sometimes, if we have missing charges or something like that, where we really have to dig in, or if a new rule comes out and we want to dig in and kind of understand what the impact of that is for our doctors or for our coding and researching that as well. So it's a busy day, but it keeps you engaged and always thinking. So it's never boring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know. I had someone one time tell me they were in cardiology and they were like, this person left because they were bored. And I'm like, bored? In cardiology, cardiovascular, I cannot imagine how you could get bored coding for this specialty. I mean, even some of the things you see in the operative reports and, things, I mean, you encounter all kind of scenarios, even a vast age group. There are things that I used to read and I wouldn't even think would happen to someone in their teens, but it happens to even people in their teens. And so, board is never something that I can imagine in this cardiovascular arena.
Yeah.
Right, Linda, your turn.
Yeah, my day is pretty close to Stacy's. Coding the E&Ms, the PCIs, the stress test echoes throughout the day. It never gets boring. Doing the claim edits, the follow up from the AR department. With Baptist, they actually have sorted out their EKGs, so they have like a whole different work queue for all of those because they are in the thousands that come through daily. So there's a couple of specified coders for that, but if they there's only two of them. There's two lucky gals that get to do that. But if they get behind or whatnot, they say, hey, go help them out. They're behind. They need some help. So then it's like, yay, something different to look at for a minute. But yeah, it's never really the same. It's the heart casts are always different. Their interventions always different. Echoes are my favorite to always look at because they're never the same. If like my manager has a special project to work on, that was it. I know that the region that I worked out of, there was an outside place of service report that I had to run because that hospital that the providers went to wasn't connected to the Epic system that we work out of. And so those charges had to be manually entered. Yeah.
Good times.
So,
Oh, fun time. And
oh, yeah.
and scan that documentation. Oh, so
Yep.
fun. Been there, done that.
Yeah. So there was a registration lady that would scan in the documentation, and me and her got really close. So, because I would always be missing documentation, be like, I need this and I need that, and I'm missing this and I'm missing that, and she'd be like, okay, I'll get it for you.
Absolutely. I used to have a physician used to say it takes all the oars in the water, right? Everybody, I tell everyone that, even when I was in management and as a supervisor, I used to tell all of my colleagues and employees, no task is minute. It takes all of us. Even if you think I'm just a payment poster, I need you to post that zero pay denial so that we can see what happened and get that claim going. The scanning, the pulling the medical records, the filing,
It matters.
all of it, especially in cardiovascular, right? Because we rely on all of that detail to support the procedures that are performed, and we have to have it. We have to have it. So yeah, no task is minute.
Yeah. So
All right.
it was never the same.
So let's talk about what we call diagnostics treatments in the office. So would you say those take a good portion of your day, or those are minor compared to the E&M actual treatments?
For me, I'd say they're probably equal-ish. I mean, in the office, the E&Ms are going to be the heaviest. But like I said, my work queue is everything hospital based and in the clinic. So I don't differentiate necessarily between the two. When I'm looking at procedures and E&Ms, they're roughly equal. The EKGs throw it to the procedure side, because just like Lynette said, it's like when someone walks into the hospital, it's like we're like, and you get an EKG, and you get an EKG, and you get an EKG. The cardiologists are the ones that are reading the lion's share of those. So yes, they number in the thousands, and so there are lots of people in the group that are cross-trained on EKGs so that we can throw people into the work queue at any given time to help with those. But it's real. We have several like nurse practitioners and physician assistants that work both in the clinic and in the hospital. So in addition to our, 10, well, I think we have like 15 or 16 providers total in just our cardiology. Our, cardiothoracic surgery is separate, vascular it's separate, but so they generate quite a number of E&Ms on their own.
Definitely. Yes, I mean, I know we've had E&M teams, right? That's all they did was handle the E&Ms, and a lot of those E&Ms were still facility based, meaning inpatient. They didn't even deal with the ones that were in the office space because the volume is just so vast. I mean, the E&Ms, but again, the diagnostics do go with them because it's like you said, when they see them, that's like their first go-to is to perform an EKG or an echo or one of those diagnostics tests, stress tests. So I'm not sure if I can really say, I think I agree with Stacy. A lot of times it's about 50-50. You see about the same, because I know with both of those, you get a high volume. I remember when I was an abstract coder and team lead, we would get so many E&Ms. It's like so many diagnostics. We had teams just to handle those because the volume was so much.
All right. Yeah. So for the benefit of any new coders out there or those who want to take cardiology, what are EKGs, echoes, stress tests, and heart caths? Like, can we just go over briefly what those are so we can kind of lay out the expectation of knowing what those are?
Sure.
I say, who wants to take that one?
An EKG is going to be a diagnostic test. It's essentially non-invasive. It's when they put the little sticky pads on your chest, sometimes on your back or even your stomach or a leg, and they just run a quick check. And what it's doing is it's like measuring the rhythm of your heart to be able to determine if you're having any sort of an arrhythmia, like AFib or a heart block, or even a myocardial infarction, like a heart attack. So that is something quick and easy that you pretty much get anytime you walk into the ER, and that you get a lot of times when you walk into the cardiologist's office, especially if it's your first visit. An echo is, again, another non-invasive. It's where they're using a little wand. It's basically an ultrasound of your heart. So like if you are a woman and you've ever been pregnant, they do the ultrasound of the baby. It's basically that for your heart. They squirt the jelly on, they're moving the wand around, and they're able to see the heart in its movement and put Doppler or color flow to it to be able to see how the blood is flowing, and looking at the valves in the heart and the blood flow, and looking for masses or regurgitation of your valves or stenosis and things like that. A stress test can be as simple as running on the treadmill or riding on a bike and measuring an EKG. Sometimes they add an echo to that to see how your heart's doing while you are doing it. Sometimes it is if you're unable to do physical exercise, you're limited in your movement, they will do it with a drug like dobutamine to make your heart race faster without having to do the actual exercise piece. Sometimes they have to do like a nuclear stress test to be able to see different parts of the heart. There's also transesophageal echoes instead of on your heart. This is one where they would put you to sleep, not necessarily sleep, moderate sedation, so the twilight state. And then they have a probe that goes down your throat. And they're looking at basically your heart from the inside through your esophagus. And did you ask about anything else?
Yeah. And I always, and just to add to that, when I think of it too, I say that in my mind, because sometimes I have to break it down so I can keep up with what the difference is. So I would always say EKGs are like your abnormalities for your electrical parts of your heart, where your ultrasound, which is that probe Doppler, that is for your irregular things with the heart structure, with looking at how the heart is structured. So that's kind of how I keep the difference between an EKG and an echo. And I will tell you, I have been a candidate of the drug stress test, and it works. I literally was laying down feeling like I was on a treadmill. I had knee surgery, and as a result of my knee surgery, I started having some palpitations, and they did a stress test, and I couldn't do the whole treadmill thing, so they gave me the injection, and I thought that was real intriguing. But it does work. That drug does work.
Well, I get to go run on a treadmill and have a stress echo next week. So
Look at you.
good times.
I think it's fun when I have to do stuff that I know with coding, right? I maybe that's the nerd in me, right? I'm showing my nerdy Kimberlyisms, right? But I love it when I have to get a test or something performed, and I can read it and go back and say, interesting.
I know. I asked our nurse practitioner, I'm like, so do I have to have my own heart cath to be able to go watch one, or what? I want to go see.
Yes.
All right, so let's ask an audience-based question. This is one that I'm going to ask both the panelists and the audience to chime in on. So, talked earlier about cardiology being the most loved and most hated topic in coding. So, why do we think it's that way? And for the people watching, chime in on if you have an issue with cardiology. Put it in the comments. We want to discuss that. And if you love it and what you love about it and why you love it, tell us that too, because we want to try to pinpoint what the disconnect is and how we can fix that.
Well, I will say that I think it's because it's daunting because of all the constant change, right? But even when I'm teaching it, because I am a AAPC built instructor, and I always hear people when they get to cardiology, they're always stressed. They always find it so hard, and it takes them a minute to get going. But I always tell them it's the rules. So you have to read the rules. Once you read the rules, you understand what they mean by this is included in that procedure, so you can't add it on, and you get all that down. Um, it is daunting. I won't say it's easy by any means, but once you get the hang of it and you do it enough, I think it's like anything. Practice, 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 right? The repetitiveness will bring on the retention that you need so you can master the skill. I think it's a love-hate because of that, because people sometimes they, a lot of times we think things, we read it, okay, we should get it. That's just us. We want that quick gratification. It's like, okay, I read it. Now I should be able to do it. But with cardiology, sometimes you got to work at it, right? You got to go back and read it a couple more times. You have to understand what the payer policies and criteria says about it. And so I just think with all of that, the challenge and the daunting of it, it makes it a love hate. But again, I too sometimes have to pipe down, right? Because I've done it so long that when you're going through, I tell people all the time, slow me down, because you get to talking and you're going through it and you're telling it. And me and you, Stacy, we get to going and talking and talking, and before you know it, we have to be like, okay, let's wait, make sure we get this, because you do it so much it becomes natural. But I do understand if it's, it's like me trying to pick up ortho, right? If I was to pick up ortho today, I'd be like, whoa, wait a minute, because that's not my
Mhm.
wheelhouse, right? So I think it's that's a challenge a lot of people face.
How about you,
I'll
Linda?
come at it from a different angle and say, too, I was a TA for AAPC before I started my coding job.
A great one
And
at that.
it, based on my experience with the students that I tutored and that I interacted with and my own experience, honestly, I think that when you're a student of the coding and you're a new coder, I think a lot of it has to do with the overwhelming amount of information in that chapter. Because when you're talking about cardiovascular, a lot of times, people might think that that's all cardiology, but it's not. I mean, when you're looking at that 30,000 series in there, you're talking a lot about cardiothoracic surgery, vascular surgery, interventional radiology, and cardiology. And then in addition, when you're trying to learn that cardiology piece, they throw in that, a lot of cardiology is in the 90,000 series.
Yeah.
And
I tell them all the time, you can literally code a case simultaneously with a code from the 30,000, a code from the 70,000, and a code from the 90,000. It's like I've done it,
yeah,
and that too brings on more of a challenge, more intimidation,
right.
because once you start reading all those rules in the 70,000 series about when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate, what's a diagnostic versus a therapeutic, again, it is that it can become very overwhelming. It can.
Right. And to know, and I know that the struggle that I had when I was learning was not at first not understanding the difference between when it was asking me something, you have to read all of those words, because I was like, what in the world is the difference between these codes, and not understanding at first, the difference between an open, a cutting procedure versus a percutaneous procedure, and being in the 30,000s for those cutting procedures and being in the 90,000s for those percutaneous
catheter, exactly.
Right. So the transcatheter procedures and the percutaneous access versus the open access, I think trips a lot of people up at first too. And so I think that's part of it. It's just, it's so much information, and it's kind of that first chapter that you hit in your studies that is that level of information.
Absolutely.
What always sticks with people. And I'm always like, well, if you're having trouble with cardio, just wait till you get to Ian. Because that's the one that trips me up. I hate.
But no, you're so right. And even it's so funny because even when I first got on, I remember struggling with non-coronary versus coronary.
That too.
Knowing that there are procedures, even something as simple as an IVUS, right? You have to make sure if you're coding an IVUS, are you coding it for coronary? Are you coding it for non-coronary? Because the codes are totally different. So I do say that you're right. That all that little detail, but as I said, it's the rules. Once you get it enough, and once you do it enough, you can get it. And I tell everybody, if I can get it, I got it. I got certified. You can too. I promise. You just got to work at it. And I did. I had to work at it.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but if you work at it, you can get it.
All right, Lynette, how about you feel about this? What is your opinion on why coders have a hard time with cardiology?
I think they see an open, as a new coder, they open the cardiology section, they take a look at it and they go, oh my God, I'm not going to like this. And then that's just where they put their mind, really. And, it really is a mindset. And then some people, they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to get through this and really fall in love with cardio. And then others just stick in that mindset and they just, they're bound and determined not to like it. And then it just becomes a hard section for them. I guess I'm kind of that same way when it comes to OBGYN. So, I would rather take cardio codes over the OB codes any day.
And that's funny because both of those are specialties that I spent a lot of time in. Before I got into cardiovascular, I did OBGYN for almost 10 years.
I would rather take cardio over OB any day of the week. But, OB wasn't my thing when I was learning, and I fell in love with cardio, and somehow that's where I landed, fresh out of school and, fresh out of training. And that's just happened to be where I stayed. And I love it.
And I do think that's it too. I think so, Lynette. I think once you get, I tell my students this too. It's like, you got to find what's your niche, right? I have tons of friends and they do risk adjustment coding. I am not a risk adjust person, but I do think it's because I started on the billing procedural side, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was comfortable in. That's what I got introduced to when I first got into the medical business of healthcare arena. Even as a unit secretary, I used to see those things all the time. And so I think you just have to figure out, once you figure out what your niche is and what specialty you're connected to, I think that's what you promote, right? That's what your passion becomes.
Yeah. I've tried risk adjustment too, and I did it for about a year. I got the certification in it, and I'm just like, it's just not my thing. I have it, I know it, I can do it, but cardio is just, it's where my heart is.
If I never had to look at my ICD-10 book again, I would be fine. I love my CPT book. I'm a procedure coder. I do not care for diagnosis coding whatsoever.
I love them both. I use my ICD-10. I'm glad that I'm proficient at it and I can do it. It comes with teaching, right? I have to have a good balance of both. But I am by heart a procedural person. I know that I love doing procedural coding as well, more than I do anything.
I want to put a comment on the screen because someone just put something that I think hits the nail kind of on the head at an odd angle, which sometimes bends the nail. Different topic altogether. But Diane Ellis, I'm going to put this on the screen because I actually think this is one of the things that we're all sidestepping, and it's the anatomy.
Yeah.
And I know I try to avoid anatomy because anatomy is a monster up in itself, but Diane says, anyone wanting to learn cardiology, you have to know the anatomy. Coding cardiovascular for over a decade and took years of learning the anatomy of the cardiovascular system. And this is something that I agree with because when I started coding, I did A&R for about 4 or 5 months. And I started working for the small sports medicine physical therapy office. And then I went to a hospital that did cardiovascular and pulmonary, and that's all they did. And as a kid growing up, I always thought I'm never gonna understand a heart because it's this kind of mystical, magical organ that we're not meant to know how it works. And I think that gave me a mental block that I set a limit. I set a limit myself, like I'm never gonna learn this. But once you do, and you realize that it's not magic and it's science, and you get the understanding of it, and just kind of repeatedly seeing it in action, it sinks in. And I think when you take a coding course and you're given 2 or 3 weeks to study it, it's not enough time.
Oh no.
But,
And I tell them, yeah. And I tell them that too. And I'm a proponent of medical illustrations. I tell everybody, go to YouTube University, Google University, they're your friends. Okay. Go and look for those medical illustrations. Because I'm gonna tell y'all, I got in the administrative side of business healthcare because I do not like blood. I do not like gore. I like the color red, as you see, but no, only on a shirt. And so yes, I say go and look at those medical illustrations, and you can get the non-gory ones. And all of those will give you a version of different medical anatomy, medical procedures, even because sometimes when I was looking at procedures for like EVARs and TVARs and things, I didn't always understand what was going on. And I had one instructor long ago tell me, if you don't know where it is, you don't know what it is, you don't know what's being done, how in God's name can you code it? You have to have a basic understanding, right? So I say, and when you go to those sources, remember it's your onus. Make sure you use reputable sources. You can find on YouTube, CMS, OIG, all of them have videos out there. Go to the medical schools and universities, look for health organizations, those associations and the societies. You want to make sure you're getting good content, right? But I say all the time, use Google University and YouTube University. We are so blessed that we have this stuff at our fingertips. Like there's no reason. And especially if you're going to do any kind of interventional procedures, because you have to know Appendix L. You have to know where those catheters are being parked. And you have to know orders, right? That first order, second order, third order, they don't give you that anatomy in the coding manuals. You have to be able to relate that to where the anatomy is on Appendix L so you know what code you need to pick. And that is all part of learning that anatomy. And get your resources. Right now, like I said, everything's at our fingertips. It's no reason not to know. And a lot of times you have to keep doing it over and over and over again until you make it make sense for yourself. Practice makes perfect.
Anatomy coloring books,
yes,
are amazing.
And flashcards.
Coloring it helps. It just helps you to remember.
Yeah.
While you're putting color to it. The same, and some people are visual learners, some people are, auditory learners, some people are tactile learners. And that helps both visually, and if you are tactile with it, the same way. I'm not going to learn something if I hear it, I have to write it.
Yeah. I tell them all the time, I'm a hands-on doer, right? I'll listen to you, but I still got to go back and do it and figure out my Kimberlyism way to make it make sense to me, right? Because it don't always make sense how someone else said, but if I can put it into action for myself, it'll make sense. So yes, and I love those. And those coloring books are so affordable on Amazon. You can find gazillions of coloring books and flashcards for anatomy on Amazon at a very affordable cost.
Well, and if we're talking about resources, I would say like Kimberly said, YouTube is an amazing resource. Again, you want to be finding reputable sites, and you have to be mindful of the date of the video, because you don't want to be learning something that's out of date, because the medical industry changes constantly. But also Quizlet. Quizlet is a free app that you can put on your phone or your tablet. You can load in flashcards. You can make your own flashcards. And that's how I learned of my refreshed and learned a lot of the anatomy and most of like the prefixes and suffixes and root words, because I just made flashcards for all of that. And like putting the kids to bed, or sitting in car line, or waiting in a doctor's office, or anywhere I was sitting, I was doing my flashcards on my phone. constantly. I didn't have to take a bunch of flashcards with me. They were available on my phone. So, for new coders who are struggling to learn certain rules or certain prefixes, suffixes, because, I think the thing that I saw when I was a TA trip most people up was, unfortunately, I think that there has been a big marketing push out there of companies who are trying to sell classes in medical coding, who are kind of taking advantage and being like, hey, you stay-at-home mom with 3 kids can come and take this class for 2 months and then go work from home and make $40 an hour. And that's just not realistic. And, what I saw trip people up was both falling into that and not understanding how difficult this industry can be.
Oh, yeah.
But also skipping the anatomy and physiology course and the medical terminology course and thinking how hard can it be. If you don't have that base, if you don't have the base of understanding what the body does, how it functions, and why it functions like that, and the disease process, but also the terminology, because learning the terminology is learning a whole nother language. I mean, when you are coming into medical coding, you are essentially going to need to learn the equivalent of a foreign language. It has its own roots and suffixes and prefixes, and you can't abstract an op note or a note from a doctor without understanding.
Not adequately, right? Yeah.
And so, and then you might get it, you might kind of get it. And then I saw so many of my students failing on the CPC, 1, 2, 3 times because they couldn't do it fast enough, right? You're on a timer. But if you know those things, if you have those down, if you understand the language, then you can, abstract a note, you can answer a question faster. Yeah. So knowing those things is key.
Definitely. You have to have that. I just saw Lady's comment. I was about to say, Lady is so right. Hey, Lady, you have to have that foundation, medical terminology, anatomy, even pharmacology. You have to make sure. And I tell everybody, this is our career, right? You're not always going to get paid for it. I hear some people always say, well, I don't want to spend time doing that. I'm not getting paid for that. I'm not doing this. I spend countless hours up at night just learning and reading and going over stuff. Why? Because it's my career and it's going to make me better and more proficient and secure in what I'm doing. A lot of times it's not for anybody else. It's for me, because the last thing I want to do is make myself not credible, right? I want to make sure that what I'm disseminating is accurate. And that's to anyone, right? To my students, to my VPs, my directors, my physicians. When you're putting stuff out, when it's your career, you're going to have to invest in yourself. So take that time and, use your resources. And I know sometimes we don't have access to, courses and things, but there, like I said, tons of things out there that are, some of them are free, and you can get what you need and take that extra time and invest in yourself so you can be confident.
How about you, Lynette?
I completely echo everything. Definitely having a hard background or learning medical terminology and physiology will definitely help prepare you a lot better for this career, for any specialty, not just cardiology, but any coding specialty that you decide to go into. So it just, you got to know your stuff.
Yeah, I know, and it's so funny. But and I know we say a medical field is speaking another language, but you know what? When I was in banking had their own language. If you work in retail have their own language. You work in food service have their own language. It's like no different from any other industry. You have to do your part. It's your onus to make sure you level up, whatever it is.
My husband's a truck driver and they have their own language. And I'm like, man, I had to kind of learn their lingo just to understand explain what was going on. And
I know.
he's kind of learned some of mine. He's like, oh, you're talking that medical stuff. Okay, I'm gonna leave you alone.
I understand. My husband's a machinist, and I'm the same way. I'm like, what are you talking about? Tool and die and what? Drilling? What? Yes, it's like everybody have their own language. So in
Yeah.
medical industry, business of healthcare, it's no different. We have to
No.
do our own. And again, there are tons of resources. We're so blessed. I tell everyone the worst thing about COVID was all the deaths and all the sickness, right? But I think it came out with so much that we could do virtual. There's so much that
Yeah.
we're doing, even like this cheerleading that John is putting on. This all is so great that we have it at our fingertips. We can all be in our homes in different states, different cities, different time zones, and all we have to do is invest the time to make us better. And education, no one can take that away from us. So I tell people when they say my job won't pay for it, don't worry about it. It's education. You're going to take it with you wherever you go. So you're a lifetime learner. Take it with you.
All
You
right,
got to
so
enjoy learning. You really do.
yeah, it's a lifestyle. It's like what's that slogan from the army? It's not just a job;
That's right.
it's an adventure. Because I've seen some things, and we've all seen things in coding in general, and that's what makes it interesting. So, like, we always try to find what interests us. Like I saw a comment here. I'm gonna put Deanna Halesley on Mudspot, but she hasn't found her passion yet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the purpose of why we have these kind
Mm-hmm.
of coding conversations. We want to talk about what each coding role entails, so you can find your niche. Not everybody is going to be able to do cardiology. Everybody's going to find it intriguing. Finding what's good for you is why we have these. Help you find what you're going to be happy doing. So, like, we're always talking about different specialties and kind of cross training, but that helps to a degree. But knowing what you're walking into is what we want to get at. So, I know that with cardiology, this is one of the medical specialties that has its own certification and its own coursework in addition to CPT. So can we talk about that? I know we all have a certification. So let's talk about what, if a person finds that they love cardiology and they want to do this, what are the necessary steps they need to do to advance themselves?
Well, I definitely think you want to set yourself up for success, right? So you need to connect with someone, even if it's not a full-fledged course, right? Connect with someone that you know is strong in that arena and help them to ask them to be your mentor, right? I will be honest, I shared with you all, I went from OBGYN into vascular and then to cardiovascular. I was blessed that my physicians that took me into vascular, they knew that I didn't know anything about vascular. They knew I came from OBGYN, but they were so willing to invest into making sure that I understood. One of my physicians, he used to have a weekly class with me and my team members. I was the supervisor and I had about 7 or 8 people under me. We would have weekly meetings where he would go in and he would draw illustrations and definitions and things so we know what they were doing when they did vascular procedures and what did they mean when they said the patient was on dialysis and they had to put a port in, and what that looked like. And so you have to get the right people to help you, right? And then you have to take up some of your onus. Find you a course, get you a study guide, get you that anatomy terminology class. Go and study Appendix L. I'm gonna tell you all, when I first saw Appendix L, when I got in this arena, I was like, what the what?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to read this and figure out what? I mean, it was so hard for me. And so now when I teach it, I never let that go. So I try to teach it on a level where I knew I needed the person that mentored me to break it down for me to get it. And I was able to get it. And so I remembered that. But again, I had to do the work. I couldn't think that the only time I looked at Appendix L was when I met with her because I would have never got it. I had to get the charts. I had to study. I had to go through all of that. So I say, do your part, but connect. Networking is so profound, guys. There's nothing like networking. good. There's nothing like networking. And I'm going to tell you all, people want to help.
Mhm.
People don't mind you reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, I want to learn cardiology. Can I get with you, and can you go through a course with me, or can you prepare a course for me, or can you be my mentor?" There's tons of people out there that want to help. So I say find you your person, and then go out there and do your onus. And again, they're all, I mean, I can name, there's so many vendors that you could go to too if you wanted to put some money with it. There's Z Health, there's Karen Zepko and Associates, there's MedLearn, there's so many more. You can even start with societies or organizations like AHA, right? Or American College of Cardiology. Just go out there and read. Sometimes I used to just go out there and read some of the articles in education that they had out there in cardiology, because reading some of that stuff too brought on understanding, and just repetitiveness bring on the retention. So then when you read, oh, you read about an EVAR, you get an abstract note about an EVAR, you see the procedures. After a minute, it all starts coming together, right? You start understanding better.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would say all of that, and it's just to advance, to be secure in your position. It just takes time, and it takes your desire to learn, and to invest in yourself. If invest doesn't have to mean money. It can mean money, but it doesn't have to. It's time.
Yeah.
Um, Kimberly said it, and I've said it too. YouTube is great. When I was trying to learn things, if I didn't understand something, the first thing that I would do is go to YouTube and type it in. What is a PCI?
Still do that.
I want to do too. Yeah,
like I did that today.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
Yeah.
I want to understand something. You will be able to find a video that literally walks you through from start to finish in like illustration that someone has taken the time to make to show you what that is, or what the difference is between two procedures, and Google as well. But like Kimberly said, Z Health, Dr. Z has some great resources. Some of them are more affordable than others. I mean, he has like PDFs for pacemakers and PCIs and just all sorts of stuff that you can download and read through, to kind of understand the coding differences and what's included and what's not. It goes beyond what's in CPT to standard operating procedure, essentially. But right now, this is more on the cardiothoracic side, but they do have a lot of cardiology, and they also do a good job of explaining congenital conditions and congenital surgeries for the pediatric side. But the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, STS, every year in February-ish, they do a coding symposium, and it's like $300 or something like that. Your company may even pay for it through tuition reimbursement. And it's 2 days, 24 CEUs or 23 CEUs or something. And they will go through so much information in the codes. And these are the people, it's taught by the surgeons, and they walk you through like the procedure and what they're doing and why the code is what it is and why the code used to be. So it's excellent information.
Society of Vascular Surgery does the same thing too. I think they meet September or October in Chicago. I used to go when I was a supervisor every year with one of my physicians. And you're right; those are great to go to if you.
And this is virtual on demand. You get access for a year, so you can take your time if you don't want to spend the 2 days, because that would make my mind explode. But then AAPC, AAPC has the CCC for the cardiology credential. They also have the CCVTC if you want to go cardiovascular, and then they have the CERC if you want to go interventional radiology. Those are all like natural paths. It's like once you're into cardiovascular, it's not hard to branch into vascular, because some of your cardiologists are going to be doing that, but also the interventional radiology side, because some of your interventional cardiologists are already doing some of that. And with the IR stuff, once you understand the that you have to code how you're getting there, what you're doing while you're there, once you understand the general process,
Part of the catheter, right?
Right. It makes it easier, to understand that. And those coders are highly niche and highly sought after because they are, few and far between, because it is a harder specialty to deal with. And then auditing as well, get your CPMA, you code cardiology for a while. It's an easy transition to start auditing for cardiology as well.
I'm a witness.
Yeah. And doing compliance too.
Yeah.
So, and teaching, consulting. There are so many avenues once you've been a day-to-day coder and you understand the guts of the cardiology specialty. There's so many different ways to branch out, but all of it leads back to education and constantly staying on top of the changes and constantly staying on top of the compliance side of things, and just understanding that spending time on yourself to learn those things is only going to make you better and only going to improve your chances for expanding your future. So
you have to invest. I always tell my students, you got to do the work. There's no way around doing the work. You got to do the work.
All right, Lynette, your turn.
I mean, again, ditto. There's really nothing. I mean, invest in yourself, do the work. Dr. Z is an amazing resource. I use him as much as I can because he is one of the most relied on, really, when it comes down to where I work for cardiology.
He's such a nice guy. He's such a nice guy. He's spoken from our chapter before. He's very welcoming. I don't mean to cut you off, Lynette. I'm sorry. But another thing I forgot to mention, he has what he calls Ask Dr. Z. And that is a very affordable subscription. It's like $25 a month. And you can ask questions too while you're learning. That saved me so much when I was an abstract coder and a team lead on a lot of these cases, because I would go out there and ask my questions and gave him examples of what I was seeing, and he would offer me suggestions. Him and Dr. Dunn both. He has a team over there. So that's another quality he has. Go ahead,
and if you actually follow him on LinkedIn, I think he's actually doing a webinar, a free one, in January. Yep. So if you're interested in learning cardiology or seeing anything about that, or needing CEUs, there's a free one. Do it.
That's right. Or if you just want to know what it entails, right? Because he's going to put on his full webinar. So if you want to see, hey, am I interested in this? Is this something I really think I want to dive into? He's a good teacher to watch. He's going to go through all of it and give you good information.
Yeah, I love his presentations because they really are in depth and well put together.
Yes. And he's a coder doctor. So that's like the best, right? He understands our little world, and then he brings us into their world as a clinician, put it together. I love when I can learn from physicians that also get our business of healthcare world, right? It makes it so much easier.
Makes it so much easier.
On that note, I will rep for Dr. CJ Wolf. He just started a few months ago a website called codermedschool.com. And he has free videos, and then he has different levels of subscription. But his videos are excellent because he is an MD, but he has been in the coding revenue cycle space for many years. And so he understands both sides, but he does do that same thing, but for generalizations, not just cardiology, for kind of everything, and really, will break it down and teaches you like the physiology or the anatomy or even the procedure side much better than you could get from other people, just because he knows both sides of it. So
yes, Dr. CJ Wolf. Christy asked, what was his name again?
Yeah, it's codermedschool.com.
Yes, and he's on LinkedIn. So, and if you all don't have a LinkedIn profile, make a LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn is so superb and supportive in networking. There's so much education that goes out there. There are tons of people, even Terry Fletcher. If you know Terry Fletcher, if you don't know her, look her up. she's always putting education out there about cardiology and cardiology procedures. So that's another resource that is out there. And she does a LinkedIn that is no cost. So again, there's so many resources out there, guys.
Yeah. I just want to post one question from Dan Heisley again. This is something that we always try to aim towards. So this is a question that is important. So when you look for your first coding job, do you just look for someone to take you, to hire you, or do you go towards something you actually want to do? And I want to say that it's what you want to do. Because if you're going to be doing this for the next 30, 40, 50, or 900 years, you want to make sure it holds your interest. I dabbled a lot. I have taken so many certifications. I've studied so many topics, but I always go back to cardiology because it holds my interest. And that's what you need to look for. I mean, you can always take somebody to hire you and take you under the wing and you can learn from them. But basically, you want to make sure that you find a role that's going to make you happy. I mean, I'm hoping everybody agrees with me, but I think that's the way to go. In a pinch, yes, you might need to start small, like, front desk, front desk work, get your foot in the door. But eventually, once you get the foundations, you want to be where you want to be. You don't want to be.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to add, because I was going to say sometimes you can't get that job in cardiology or OB or ortho when you're just starting, right? So I say, don't hinder yourself. Don't get in your own way by saying, I'm not going to take a job until I get cardiology. Well, of course not. You need to make money, right? You need to get experience. You need to get exposure, So any job in the arena will give you exposure. I have worked unit secretary jobs. I've worked claim processing jobs. I didn't start where I am today, right? I've worked all kinds of jobs. I've worked jobs that I've said I'm never going to work that job again, right? So I think you have to put yourself out there, because if you're new, how do you even know what your passion is if you haven't tried it? So that was my thing. I had to try. I was like John. I did digestive. I did OB. I did anesthesia. I mean, I've done all sorts of things. And now I'm more in the compliance education realm. But it took all of those to get me to know where I want to be now. And that didn't happen overnight. I'm like 20 something years in now. So, I say, don't get in your own way. If you get an opportunity, take it, because you never know where it can lead. You never know if it will help you develop what your passion is, or what you want to do, or like me, know what you definitely don't want to do, right? Because some of those jobs are good for that too. You're like, hey, I know I don't want to do that anymore.
Ortho
as well.
Ortho. I mean, I think that question could be its own podcast. I could spend a whole hour just on.
You're right, Stacey. Oh my God.
I would agree with Kimberly, though. I mean, so sure. I think that when you're just starting out, you don't necessarily know what you like and what you don't like until you're able to actually code it. Like if you would have asked me when I was in the middle of my course,
that's right,
if I was going to be a cardiology coder, I would have said probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But I did like the cardio. I have a special affinity for it, and I have, it's close to my heart just because of family heart issues. But I do, you don't necessarily know just from the class what you will and won't like. But also, there's a big thing in coding right now. It's the chicken and the egg. It's, how do you get experience if no one will hire you?
Right.
But, how do you get hired with no experience, right? And so it really just depends on the job. So if you can go and you can try for the specialty that you want, for sure. But if that doesn't pan out, you can't. It's the same way where I've had students tell me that they only want a remote job. Well, that's great, but that is not guaranteed to be a thing for you. You may, based on your previous work experience and your grasp of the information, not be able to get a remote job right away. You might have to go and either do hybrid work or work in the office or in the hospital for a period of time and then move roles.
That's right.
It's just the market is such that it's a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill, and a little bit of interview skill as well, which is its own other thing. But, you know, I was in the right place at the right time with the right skill set, because I'm 16 months in from into my first coding job, and I was lucky. I mean, I walked into a situation where the company was hiring. They needed a cardiology coder, and it was 100% remote, and I've loved every minute of it. But that's not always what happens. You know, I would say that more often than not, you know, if you're a brand new coder, you're a CPCA, you have no experience, start local, because you are competing against exponentially less candidates for a job. If you are local and you're applying directly onto the website of the local hospital office, what have you, then if you're trying to do it through Indeed or Monster, you're up against hundreds or even thousands of people. And also, you know, just be flexible with, you know, location as far as whether you're in the office versus remote. And you know, facility, like hospital-based coding, like what I do, especially like teaching hospitals, they're more prone to hire coder ones as a CPCA with no experience into any number of specialties. So if you have a hospital or teaching hospital near you, try them as well, because you're more likely to get a chance to do something than in a private office or private practice.
Yeah. And I do, and I think I always tell everybody too, I've seen exceptions in all areas though, because even in a physician's office, you will have sometimes, I used to say, even me as a manager, I can teach you how to do cardiology. I need someone to have all the other skills too. Be dependable, know how to meet deadlines, know how to communicate, be a team player. Show all those attributes as well, because depending on what they're looking for, if you have someone that's already strong in ortho and OBGYN and cardiology, we normally can teach you how to do that, right? Sometimes it's those other skills that can shine through. But don't get in your own way saying, oh, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to apply for that, because I find so many people, they think once they get certified as a coder, they want a coder job. And sometimes it doesn't always happen that way. You might have to take the medical records job or the check-in job or the checkout job. And I say, keep yourself ready. Constantly still be learning, constantly still be making sure you keeping up with your education, your continuing education on being a coder, and know the guidelines, know how to maneuver sites like CMS, right? Know how to read payer policies. All of those attributes can help you stand apart, because sometimes they will say we want someone with 2 years experience. But if an employer has been looking for someone for a year and they haven't found anyone and they're desperate, they may make an exception. And you just got to make sure you're ready when that opportunity comes. Don't let that opportunity be a failed opportunity because you're not ready.
Right. Yeah, it's that kind of stuff, that skills that you look for, aside from knowing, you know, you've got your specific skills in coding, but also things that you don't necessarily think of and that they don't really focus on. You know, if you go through like the AAPC course or one of the 16, 20-week courses, you know, understand what NCCI edits are. Understand that at the end of the day, you have to be compliant with what the payer policy is. So just because it says it in CPT doesn't make it, you know, a thing. Your legally binding contract is with your payer. So understand that is going to be, you know, something that's going to change and be different. Understand your terminology, understand your anatomy, you know, those things, but then those intangible skills, you know, being on time, attention to detail, dependability, personability,
collaboration,
being able to work cross-functionally with other people, being able to multitask and do other things, but also like being proficient in electronic stuff.
That's right.
Excel, Word, you know, being able to do those things without a lot of issue
Even email, just knowing how to send an email, having email etiquette. Mm-hmm.
Please, please, please don't ever log into a virtual interview without understanding how your webcam or your system works, because I guarantee you 10 times out of 10 that if you have trouble with the technology during your online interview, you're not going to get that job. Because especially if it's a remote role, and that's why you're doing a remote interview, that hiring manager, if you can't even handle the technology just on Zoom, then think of the technology issues that they are thinking you're probably going to have when you're working.
It caused them to have pause, right?
Nobody's going to want to have to deal with that. We're busy enough, right? So, just all of those like little things. So if you aren't proficient in Excel, if you aren't proficient in technology, find a course for that. There are different little things, little tutorials online you can take for free. Focus on those as well, because any of those skills are going to make you stand out from other candidates who don't have those.
Yeah, and set you apart. Yes, definitely. Because in this industry, like you said, you have to be able to set yourself apart, because there's so many people looking. People are constantly looking just like you. So you got to figure out, how can I set myself apart? What's my Kimberlyism to stand out, right? To make them notice me. That's what you want to do. And I love what Deanna Hensley put in there. She said, Dr. Campbell has said all year, you should be learning faster than you're growing.
Yep.
Always learning, lifetime learners, right?
Any last thoughts, Lynette?
No, I completely agree. I know when I first started out, I did exactly like Kimberly and Stacey said. I actually took one of those jobs as a medical records clerk, and to start out in a small private practice with 2 cardiology providers, which is where I got my start.
That's right.
And so that's, and I just worked my way up. I was in medical records, and then I went and transferred interdepartment into insurance verification. And while I was sitting there, I was in between the head coder and the hospital coder. So I was like, hey, let's means, and whenever one of them went on vacation, I was the fill-in because I had my certification.
Nice.
And didn't have to worry about coding getting behind and anything like that. So, stuff happens for a reason. Take some jobs. And when I hired on, the manager for the medical records department was the same manager that was over the coders. And I told her, this is where I want to be eventually. And I kept, a little bug in her ear, this is where I want to be. If you have any spots open up. And within a year, I was helping the coders. I might not have had a coding title, but I was assisting the coders, which got me more experience and helped me get the job at Baptist. So,
and that's what it's all about. It's about, again, that confidence and that experience and making sure you feel good and know what you're doing, right?
Yeah. Yep. I'm forever grateful for my start, for where I started, because it just made me a stronger coder to, what I was looking for insurances, who was paying first, who was paying second, to going back to, denials. It's all connected.
It
so
is.
Knowing it
kissing cousins, right?
Yep. Front to back to all around. So, I mean, even those little jobs, they do make a difference, and I wouldn't put any of them past it.
Definitely.
All right, well, we've been in here for 1 hour and 20 minutes already. This was the longest presentation so far, and I would like to thank my panelists, Stacey Donnelly, Kimberly Jovette Williams, and Lynette Millhouse. So this is one of the largest communities on LinkedIn, coding and in the healthcare industry. So if you're on LinkedIn, reach out to us. There's a lot of people out there that are willing to help if you have questions. There's a lot of coding experts, a lot of coders out there that are specialized in cardiology. If this is for you, there's one thing I want you to take away is that cardiology is not for everyone, but it is for you and it interests you. You need to prepare yourself. There's a lot of information, and there's a quote I want to give, and I say this a lot in my presentations, but it's from Louis Pasteur. It says, "Chance favors the prepared mind." So when you are job hunting, one of the key advantages you can have is knowing and showing that you know what you're doing during the interview. So cardiology has a lot of preparation. If you're willing to put in the legwork, it pays off. This is a very fantastic role to be in because there's always going to be, there's always work. There's always a need for cardiology. So if it's something that is interests you, reach out to one of us and we will respond, hopefully in a very timely manner, but not us. There are people on LinkedIn that we can connect you with that can help you, mentor you, offer you guidance in the meantime. And I think as a group here, any one of us four will be glad to help you if you have questions. But in the coming weeks, I know we're going to be talking a few different topics. Last week we talked about, I think, was risk adjustment. Next week we're going to talk about emergency room coding. So that's another topic. We'll be hitting different roles. Eventually, I will hit on topics that we consider foot in the door roles, like front desk work, health information management, HIM specialist, even surgical schedulers. They're all kind of this, like they lead to coding. There's some kind of coding benefit you can get from working these roles because you see the inner workings that you wouldn't normally see as just being just a patient. So I would like you guys to keep checking in. If there is any topic that you want to see discussed, any coding role, send me an email or send me a message on here, a comment about what you want to see. I do polls every once in a while to see what the current topic is. But next week we are going to talk about ER coding, and then we're going to get back to our normal Monday schedule. I know I have some other topics on the horizon, such as interventional radiology, orthopedics, as well as hematology, are some of the ones that are in queue. If you guys have anything you want to see, I will try to get that scheduled. But again, I want to thank you and all of our panelists for joining us, and reach out.
Hey, it's been my honor to serve. And y'all remember, challenges are stepping stones to make you successful. You can overcome them.
I want to put in a plug too. SSM is hiring. So if you are looking for a coding role, you can go to ssmhealth.com and look for their careers. I think you can work in Missouri, Illinois, Oklahoma, Wisconsin. There's a whole list of states that we support for remote coding. And to Deanna Helsley, I am 45. So I just started, I did my course within the last 2 years and just started too. So it's never too late.
That's right. And that's what I love about this arena. It doesn't matter how old you are. I literally built with a lady who can whip circles around me, and she's much older than me. But I love this arena. Once we all get in there, we're all on the same playing field, right?
Right. And so I know that Sloop here, I know that the team that I'm on is hiring for at least one coder one with no experience necessary. So
yay. Very good. Well, John, thank you so much. It's been my honor to serve. This has been great. Thank you, Stacy and Lynette. I love being on this panel with you guys. Such a great discussion.
I know you probably shouldn't have put Kimberly and I on the same panel because we both like to talk a lot. We're so far over.
But I'm sure everybody here appreciates all of your information because that's why we have these, so we can get people the insight to find where they want to be. And I hope you all join us next week. Again, we're going to keep having discussions, and hopefully this will put you where you want to be. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Happy New Year, everybody.
Sorry, it was SSM Health, Deanna. SSM Health.
And make sure you get and gain more knowledge in 2024. Happy New Year.